Ken Armstrong. I'm running for a Libertarian nomination for President of the United States. I've got a vast background in government, and you're listening to Decentralized Now.
Free the people, free the markets. Decentralized Now.
Season 2.
All right, well, you're listening to Decentralized Now, and this is probably one of the most exciting episodes that we've had. We've had a lot of people come on to talk. We've had some other people who are running as candidates for the Libertarian Party nomination, and we've never had a bad conversation. I mean, everyone we've had on the program, we've had a lot of fun talking to. We've learned a lot from. But I know, you and I, Busted, have been doing a lot of research for our guest today, and I've had a blast. I've learned a lot. I'm really excited. The guest. This has probably been one of the most enjoyable research projects we have had so far. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I've really enjoyed learning about Ken, and I really feel like you're a breath of fresh air. I don't feel like I hear a lot of other libertarians talking in the same level as you. I mean, you've got a lot of experience.
Oh, I wouldn't be running if I didn't think I was bringing something with. So thank you.
Absolutely. Yes, and on that, I have a quick bit of an introduction. This is from Ken Armstrong's website. This is a bit of information here. He's been enlisted in the United States Coast Guard and quickly went on to become a commissioned officer. He served in joint commands with all 5 military branches, commanded a NATO base in Italy, and was a NATO and United Nations advisor aboard foreign naval ships during the Bosnian War. He's been a principal architect in finance and logistics of major international joint service operations under the auspices of Vice President George H.W. Bush, and he served outside of his specialty as a federal healthcare executive working with the U.S. Surgeon General. During a significant human smuggling case in the Pacific, he led international media relations in coordination with the White House Situation Room, and also as a joint service military officer, Ken was certified on the Enhanced Naval Wargaming System at Point Loma, California. He received Coast Guard and Navy training and was assigned in littoral defense operations, mine warfare, and inshore undersea warfare. He also attended highly classified training under the auspices of the FBI and CIA in management terrorist situations. He might possibly be the most interesting man alive. So we are very excited to have Ken Armstrong on the episode. That background is incredible. So we're excited to have you on the program for sure.
Wow, I want to put that on my website. That was beautiful. Thank
you. We do a bit of meme.
Where do I meet this guy?
You know what would be a great meme for your campaign is your face on the Dos Equis individual. I'm not, that advertisement.
Unfortunately, I look more like Shrek. So
you talked about that in one of your videos. I think Shrek's a good looking guy. I like Shrek.
I'm glad my wife agrees with you.
Well, yeah. So now that we've kind of done our introduction, we'll ask a few questions here. So just to start with, we watched some of your videos, and the video I'm referencing now was when you announced that you were running. So you were giving a speech, kind of kicking off your campaign. And the term that you used quite a bit was constitutional crisis. And that seemed to be a theme that you were centering a lot of your discussion. So what I got from your campaign speech, the kickoff speech, was that you feel that there's a constitutional crisis that's going on that has spurred you to take action, and you feel that you have to address this issue. So could I get you to elaborate on what that constitutional crisis is, what constitutes that, and why do you feel that the need to solve this?
And I have to say, I made that speech back in the middle of May, long before all of this impeachment stuff started. And what I was referring to was the acrimony and division that has gridlocked our government, that caused the shutdown in December and January, and so many things going on that we're not getting the work of the people done at all. We're just purely getting political agendas, just people swinging axes. And as I said, that was before all of this impeachment stuff started, and now we've got a president who is challenging the constitutionality of the impeachment, et cetera. I mean, it's just nonsense.
Yes, so it seemed like the situation has deteriorated even since you started your campaign. Is that right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And this is kind of what I was referring to, because it's the natural course going to spiral, and it will only get worse with the current people running the show.
It does seem to be, in a gridlock between these two parties. So I don't know if you want to use that metaphor of an immovable object and an unstoppable force, where there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of bickering, and nothing really seems to get accomplished. And I think that's where the Libertarian Party, has a lot to offer. And we've had, in the Libertarian Party, the past 8 years, we've had Gary Johnson as our presidential nominee, and obviously he's not running now, and that's a significant amount of time for one person to. I mean, you could certainly say that maybe Tom Woods or Ron Paul, they've done quite a bit to educate the public on libertarianism, but certainly Gary Johnson in this spot has done a lot to be an ambassador for the Libertarian Party. So looking back at Gary Johnson, and there's been a lot of debates about Gary Johnson. Or Dave Smith wasn't particularly happy with the LP's choice of Gary Johnson. Nicholas Sarwark defended him. So a lot of people are divided on the performance of Gary Johnson. So for libertarians, potentially maybe some delegates who are going to Austin vote, how do you rate Gary Johnson's performance, and how do you compare it to what you envision your campaign to be? What will you do similarly to that, and maybe what will you do a bit different?
Well, I don't want to live too much in the past, and
Sure.
and really, I like to look forward. I'm not going to give Gary a grade, because there's a lot of things that he's just really good at. But I think that we need to be a little bit smarter about branding our party, a little bit smarter about when we're in public as libertarians, we are top down or bottom up libertarians. I actually vision the pyramid turned upside down, with the president being the lowest job in the country and local offices being the highest. But uh, so I think branding the party and recognizing that we can point to a banner carrier and say, yeah, he represents or she represents what we're really all about.
And this is more of a personal opinion of mine, but when I look at the libertarian candidates who have declared that they're running, I'll invoke Arvin Vora, and Adam Kokesh. I mean, there really isn't a candidate that I don't like. I mean, whoever. But one thing that I particularly like about you is that when I invoke the name Adam Kokesh or Arvin Vora, people who I have a high amount of respect for, they seem to be very divisive. There's a lot of controversy that, when someone talks about Ken Armstrong, there isn't that same amount of controversy and negativity, and also there's a stellar background. So having said that, I mean you're running. Why do you think? I guess if you could pitch yourself to the delegate, why choosing you as opposed to some of these other delegates? And that's sort of putting you in the hot seat a bit. But one thing that I find with the libertarian candidates is that we have a lot of support for one another, certainly more than what you had seen on the Republican stage. So to maybe put you in that space of what separates Ken Armstrong at the moment from some of the other candidates who are seeking the nomination.
Yeah, well, and first of all, and I've said this before, I'm not running against any libertarian. What I'm
Absolutely.
doing is I'm running my campaign, and in May in Austin, the party will decide which one of us is the banner carrier, and hopefully we will all line up behind whoever that banner carrier is.
Absolutely.
Dawn and I have had dinner with Vermin Supreme, and we've gone canoeing with them,
That's
and had a
terrific.
great time. We did a canoe paddle joust with him. I love the guy. I think what I bring to the table, one of the things that's not discussed very much, is the ability to lead and to delegate. We've got a lot of people who are policy smart, but it's important to have a proven track record of being able to lead people. I've led thousands of people, and I know how to delegate, and I know how to set a theme, set a mood, if you will, and people understand where I'm going, and we get on the same page. Yeah.
Free the people, free the markets. Decentralize now.
But there's a lot of Democratic candidates running right now. What's kind of your assessments of the candidates that are running, and which, if any, do you see as the biggest threat to the Libertarian Republican Party?
Well, honestly, it's interesting. In the Democratic Party, the front runners are the most dangerous. We've got Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden, all of whom are running on promises that they absolutely know they can't keep. They're way too smart to think that they can actually keep those promises. So they're merely pandering to people who are desperate in their lives, and they're dangerous people. We have some other people. I used to know Tulsi Gabbard's dad, so I'm familiar with the family. I'm familiar with Mike Gabbard, and I know what great ethical people they are. Tulsi, I think, is a little bit too big government, to control government for my taste. I'd love to see her in a Secretary of State type position.
Okay.
But the rest of them are pretty dangerous people.
Ken, what are your thoughts on some people, I don't know if this is ironic or not, but some people suggesting that, Tulsi Gabbard represents in some ways a libertarian as well. Do you think that she has a libertarian element to her and could maybe work in the party, or what's maybe your position on that?
I think if Tulsi had a couple of years in an Armstrong administration as maybe Secretary of State, she'd make a great libertarian president down the road. I think she's walking in that direction, but she has been a part of the big government, big control system for a long time, and it takes a while to get that out of your blood.
So we talked about, obviously, the Libertarian Party. We've moved on to the Democrats. So we're moving on, obviously, to the Republican Party. We know, obviously, the candidate you'll be running against is Donald Trump. Now, one thing that I admired about your speech is you didn't really bash Trump. You didn't try to attack him with a lot of hatred. And the reversal of that is kind of a theme in some of your videos of moving from hatred to love. And we're going to talk about that later on in the discussion. But with Donald Trump, obviously you're running against him. You didn't have a whole lot of negative things to say. You just simply disagreed. What's maybe your assessment of Donald Trump? Where is maybe where has he gone right? And what are some things that obviously you think you would change and you would do differently from his current performance?
Honestly, I'd have a hard time finding something that he's done right, and I don't mean that to be sarcastic. I try never to hate people, and I refuse to hate him, but he is destroying the economy. He is destroying our relations with allies overseas. I know a lot of people think he's doing a fabulous job, but I don't think they're really looking closely at what's really going on. I'm particularly upset that he panders to division and kind of increases that division.
Now, some people who would look at you mentioned the economy. Now, obviously some people would maybe give you some pushback on that and say, well, hey, look, unemployment is at record lows. There's a lot of wage growth. So how would you maybe respond to someone saying, well, maybe this system and these tariffs have worked and have stimulated the economy?
If I owned a shoe store and it wasn't doing too well, and I decided to buy all of my inventory on my granddaughter's credit card and she could pay it back in 50 years, I could make the shoe store look like it's really doing well, but that's still what he could do. And that's all he's doing. He's making all of these magical numbers appear on a $3 billion. We could make 3,000 millionaires every day in the United States on the debt he's racking up.
Wow. I did not.
Are you enjoying the podcast? Just kidding. We know you are, and you're welcome. You're listening to Decentralize Now.
Talking about Trump, you mentioned in your, I believe it was a different video from your campaign kickoff speech. This was talking about your exploratory committee. You quoted Dr. Martin Luther King, and you said, only love can drive out hate, only light can drive out darkness, darkness can't drive out darkness, hatred can't drive out hatred. So, looking at Donald Trump's campaign, however, it seems like you mentioned, he's used hatred pretty effectively as a tool to motivate people and to organize. So I hate to be sort of misanthropic with this, but to kind of challenge that position, would you say that maybe that's an appropriate way to motivate people? That phrase of peace sells, but who's buying? Do you think that with our current climate, with our history as the American people, that a message of love will actually resonate? To motivate people to go to the polls.
I think it's a cheap and easy way to do it. I think it takes a lot more hard work and a lot heavier lifting to sell peace. It really does, because most people love a good football game or a good wrestling match or something where there's two enemies opposed against each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the president tapped into, when he was a candidate, he tapped into angst in the country, and it was a racial undercurrent in the angst.
Mm-hmm.
And he's continued to tap into that, and he's continued to pander to it, really. And I don't think I won't say I don't think it's doing our country good. It is deeply harming our country.
Mm.
And I, to be really honest, I think President Obama could have done a much better job being a uniter. I think he whiffed the ball a couple of times on some great opportunities. It's not something that only President Trump has done, but we've got to stop being about pitting one side against the other. We really do.
And that's something that I was excited about. I think people view the Libertarian Party as an escape valve from that system. I know I felt that way. I mean, maybe you did as well. But we had the Clinton campaign versus the Trump campaign, and a lot of people were just tired of that, and we're very excited about the message of individual liberty that Jerry Johnson had. So I think you're doing a good service by offering people that alternative from that hate machine. If I can use that phrase.
Now, and I have to say, in regard to that, I hope the American people are willing to do some hard work, because it really will take some hard work to overcome the termite damage.
Now, can you maybe tell us a little bit more about that? What is the work maybe that people have to do? People maybe who've heard this for the first time and they're not really familiar with the Libertarian Party and your platform and your campaign. What's some of the work maybe that they can do, or what are some of the questions they can ask themselves to kind of begin that reflection?
I really start at NAP, at the non-aggression principle, and I think I start there and I keep coming back there, because if we can really educate the American people on the reality of what that principle means globally and with your next door neighbor, all politics is local, and we really need to keep that in mind. But if we can learn to react, remembering that the people that we're talking to are human beings with a story. When I watch the president, I'll tell you, I'll be really candid here. I watch him and I see a guy. I know the story of Fred Trump, his dad, and I know a lot about growing up. And I see a guy who's not had maybe quite the happy story that everyone thinks he has, and he's acting out his story. And I see the same with a lot of politicians. And I think we need to be compassionate to people, even when we really disagree with them.
Well, at this point, we've kind of discussed your campaign in general. What I'd like to do now is maybe shift and discuss, just so people can become more educated on your platform and what it is that you're offering. Kind of discuss some of your specific stances, some of your platform beliefs. And one of the ones that I'd like to start with is a very controversial issue, obviously in the country, but specifically with libertarians. I feel that this is a big divide, and it's a question that we're really starting to work out as a movement and as a party. What's your position on our border situation? I know we have a lot of people who advocate for tough border control. Some other people are more for open borders. What's your stance on our current border crisis, and how do you think we could solve that?
Well, and I have to say, my wife and I just spent the better part of 3 years down in Mexico, and I met a number of people in the caravans who were coming up, and we heard quite a different story from people than what we get on the news up here in the States. That's not to say as president, one of the things you have to do is you have to accept the Constitution and the laws of the country.
Mm-hmm.
Well, hopefully change a lot of them, and I think that we need to do massive change to our visa system. I think maybe we need to work with Mexico, Honduras, Guatemala, and maybe help them establish better ID systems so that we can allow more people to get visas into the country. So a number of little things we can do. On the large scale, I recently announced a proposal for an international free trade zone that would take the place of a whole lot of this wall that the country has constructed. It would be built entirely entrepreneurial, and inside the free trade zone, it would be exactly that. It would be a free trade zone. There would be no taxes, no duty, nothing. It would extend depending on where landholders want to make it available and that sort of thing, because we're not going to confiscate anything. But it could extend anywhere from 3 miles to 10 miles on both sides of the border. And I'm going to borrow a little piece from Larry Sharp, who I had dinner with about a month ago. And Larry is suggesting that we have 2 Ellis Islands on the Mexican border, and I like the idea of putting those immigration processing centers inside of our free trade zone. I think that would be a perfect fit. And Larry and I did talk about that. It would be an opportunity. You could have them open 24/7. People who need to update their visas and that sort of thing. In 2014, which is the last time that we have good data for this, 42% of all of the undocumented foreign nationals in the United States, 42% of them were visa overstayed. You can't build a wall. You can't. That's almost half of them were just on visa overstayed. We have to fix the visa system.
Now, this question I'm going to ask, and it's almost of a devil's advocate, because I believe that all libertarians are essentially in line with a non-interventionist foreign policy. This question is more designed maybe for people who are coming into the movement and might be excited about the campaign and maybe aren't familiar really with the advantages of a non-interventionist foreign policy. Right now, we're talking a lot about Syria. There's a crisis in Syria, and Donald Trump or whatever powers that be, for whatever reason, have decided to move out, maybe to pull, or I don't know if it's moving out or shifting around. That's another discussion. But anyway, there's a discussion about maybe reducing our footprint with our military force overseas. Some people are saying that that's irresponsible. I know Mitt Romney blasted the president for that, saying, "Hey, we're betraying allies. They need us over there." How would you address the issue of our presence overseas and what I would characterize as a very interventionist foreign policy? How does that work in relation to us being compassionate for some other nations who are in real danger?
Well, first of all, we have treaties with certain nations, and those are contracts that we're bound to. Japan, the Philippines, other places where we have mutual protection treaties, and those are contracts, and we are bound to those contracts as long as they're standing. And I don't believe in turning our back on. Talking specifically about Syria, we made a mess there. We made a horrible mess there by getting involved in a place and getting involved in issues that we probably would have been better not. And I understand the chasing down ISIS thing. I think we went about that wrong, but that's for another discussion. But what we did is we made these people on the border with Turkey dependent on our military security there, our air cover and what have you. We keep saying, well, there was only 50 people in the zone. Yeah, it was really more about air cover and that sort of thing. But I'm 100% in agreement with the president, and I don't say this very often. I'm 100% in agreement with him that we need to reduce our footprint there, that we need to get out. I think he's botching Saudi Arabia right now in exactly the same way that Syria was botched. But But I think that we created a mess, and to just simply say, well, we're done and walk away that turns us into an aggressor of sorts. And we have to be careful that we at least give people an opportunity to make themselves safe before we pull the rug out from under them. So, and that probably shouldn't have taken, really, we could have been done with it by now, maybe, in the time that since the president made the announcement. It shouldn't take very long. But to just simply tell our allies, sorry, you're on your own and no more air cover, no more support, was not the way to go about it.
Obviously, for Busted or I to talk about this, maybe we like to consider ourselves educated people, but we don't have the background, obviously, that you have with all these different branches of our armed forces and the intelligence community. So I'm fascinated to get your position on this. What is it that drives the need for American intervention? Is it well intentioned, or is it something more malicious, or is it all of the above? What is it about our nation that has us for hundreds of years, going into these other nations, doing nation building, intervening in all these different economies? What do you believe is really the source of all that?
You hit it. It's all of the above. I mean, a lot of Americans love the Rambo movie. They love to see, the good guys riding in on the, I'll say white horse, really a green helicopter, but you get my and they love to see these run in and kick the bad guys' backsides and clean up the mess and all of that kind of. And there's this thing in the American ethos that we love to see ourselves as those good guys, especially because in World War II we kind of styled ourselves as being the great rescuer of the world. But there's another thing, and we can't overlook, and it's deeply cynical and it's deeply dark, that there are people who make huge profits off of war. And those people include the arms manufacturers, the Fed, the World Bank. There's all kinds of people making enormous profit off of war. And that is not to be overlooked, because I'll tell you what, guys like me, when we're out there, putting it in the public place, we're also putting ourselves in the crosshairs with these people that don't like us to be safe.
Well, it seems like we've been over there, since Busted and I were really in high school. I mean, we've been over there for way before then, but at least specifically, some of the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's mind blowing to think that operation is still going on. And I wouldn't know. I'm not involved in that community, but I don't know what the end goal is. I don't know what the operation or the mission is. It seems like it's not really designed to end, and there's always coming up with an excuse for just a few more years. So it's terrifying to think that people are profiting off of that. And we had a discussion previously with another person who's going to be in Austin, running for the nomination, Jedi Hill, and he was fascinated with talking about the Monsanto Corporation and some of the things that they're doing. Are you familiar with Monsanto, what they've done with genetically modifying organisms and patent law, and what's your take on maybe remedying that situation?
Yeah, Jedi's a friend, and we've actually talked about that. And he is more detail oriented on it than I am. But you know, we have. I could. I'll go abstract on this a little bit.
Sure.
The pharmaceutical companies who have the government protecting their right to make a profit, even when it means people have to die for lack of medication. Uh, the federal government very cynically protects the profit of large corporations against the interests of individuals, and that is the opposite. The Declaration of Independence says it is our right, it is our duty. It is our duty, underline that 3 times, to throw off that kind of government.
So another question that I want to ask you as well, for maybe those who are listening who are curious, and definitely for those who may be delegates going down to Austin, is your position on the issue of abortion. I know in the Libertarian Party it's a very divisive issue, and I believe in our party's platform, there isn't a very hard stance, because it's so divisive. So, as a libertarian, what's your position, regarding abortion and its legality?
Yeah, and this is a tricky one because we do have people inside the party who are sort of thought police. They care they care what you think inside of your head.
Mhm.
Let me say this: inside my head, I hate abortion. I
Mhm.
hate seeing things like that happen. But what would President Armstrong do? I again, I believe that every time the government outlaws something like that, they make an enormous mess of it. If you could just simply pass a law and bad things didn't happen, that would be great. First thing I'd do is have people outlaw murder, and that ought to solve that problem. But it's not going to solve the problem. What it'll do is make more criminals. It'll force people to go to foreign countries or go to unsafe places. I don't see the government as solving that problem. So even though I really don't like abortion, I really like the government interfering with it even less.
Mhm.
I can respect that because Chemtrail and myself, we're opposite side of the fence on that issue ourselves.
Well, there's a lot of us in the party that we bang our heads on the wall because it is a hard issue to resolve.
I think it's easy for maybe members of our movement, the Libertarian Party, or people who are associated with the movement, or just maybe people who aren't registered members of the Libertarian Party, but just love freedom and returning the country to the Constitution and the vision of the founding fathers. It's very easy for many people to feel overwhelmed by what they see and to be distressed by the options that they're given by the powers that be, the Democrats and the Republicans. And I guess what's your message of hope maybe for some activists who are burned out, who have been grinding, have been working, and maybe feel very frustrated with the results? What are some things that an individual in that type of despair can do to regain hope and maintain productivity?
It really is easy to get discouraged. I've been out on the road for 5 months. Sometimes I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. But remember that our wins, we'd love to see the big wins. I mean, I would love to see everybody in the country put on a gold tie tomorrow, and that'd be a great thing. But really, we have to be aware that the incremental wins are just as big. They're just as important. And, it's sort of a starfish approach. We may not be able to bring everyone along with us. If we can just bring a few along now and then, I'd love to bring the whole country along, but I'm happy to bring a few along.
You're currently listening to the best podcast in the whole fucking universe.
Decentralized now.
What kind of got you interested in the Libertarian Party?
Well, there was a process, but at the very beginning of the process, I was with the Democratic Party of Hawaii. I was the chairman of the Civil Rights Platform Committee in Hawaii, and I was very happy with my party until the governor, who was a friend of mine, made a proposal uh, for a tax increase was going to just really damage the middle class. And he sort of hijacked the convention to sell his tax proposal. And I took a stand against that, and I found myself standing next to Tracy Ryan, who's been kind of the perennial chair of the Libertarian Party of Hawaii, and standing next to Tracy and testifying before Senate and other things against the tax proposal. I ended up having to resign my chairmanship, and that was not a big decision because I would have been fired anyway. But I had to resign, and at that point, I thought of myself as a small L libertarian. It took me maybe a dozen years after that, so maybe 12, 13 years ago, that I really started, I registered and recognized that I was part of the Libertarian Party.
Now, you are you're a Christian, yes?
Yes, I am.
Um, being a libertarian, we can be kind of outspoken. We can endorse some kind of wild ideas, sometimes less than popular ideas. Do you ever feel that your faith clashes with your beliefs as a libertarian?
I find really the Libertarian Party to be more consistent with my faith than I've actually been in both of the other major parties in my lifetime. And I find the Libertarian Party to be more consistent with what I believe in my Christian faith.
Really, that's very interesting.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, Christianity, is so in line with the idea of the non-aggression principle.
Well,
The golden rule of do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That's essentially the basis behind the non-aggression principle. Would you agree?
And since we're talking faith here, I'll just say, Jesus, that famous story of the woman caught in adultery, and he looks at all of these people who are going to enforce the law, and he says, sure, fine. The one in the crowd who's never sinned gets to throw the first stone.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think we could apply that well to our country. We whether you're talking about drug, everything that the government has done bad, from prohibition through you name it. I have to. I own this. I was one of the original architects of the drug wars back in the 80s. We have spent billions, maybe $1 trillion. I don't even know how much spent on the drug wars since I was involved, and it is a catastrophic disaster. The government doesn't do these things well, so the government needs to not forcing religious or moral or whatever you want to call it, principles in the country.
I think Thomas Sowell said something to the effect of, whatever you try to gain through subsidization, you almost get the opposite effect. And I've noticed, yeah, well, and exactly, and you can almost see that with spirituality. We grew up with George Bush, Jr. and a strong sort of Christian evangelical presence in the Republican Party, and it almost pushed people away. So it's like Christians who are attempting to spread their faith through force, through government means, they have the opposite effect of what they intend to do.
Yeah, exactly right. That's exactly what I'm saying.
You kind of mentioned, the drug wars and how they've just constantly failed. We have a lot of people in prison right now for non-violent crimes, mostly drug crimes. One thing we've talked about a lot on this program is, the prison system and how do you fix it? Do you have any ideas on, what could be done to kind of make it run more efficiently?
Well, and of course, we're talking a whole lot of the incarcerated people in the country are at state level, and there's not a lot the president can do except the bully pulpit. But for those who are in federal prisons right now, if they are nonviolent, first of all, why do we put nonviolent people in prison where they learn how to become violent? That's like
Yeah.
that's the dumbest idea we ever had. So if they're nonviolent offenders, the first thing that we've got to do is we've got to figure out how, first of all, we got to let them out. But second of all, we've got to figure out how there does need to be some sort of principle of them redressing their, what they've done. If they've stolen or whatever, then those things have to be redressed. If it's just purely a crime of, I hate the victimless crime tag and all of that. That's kind of that's been worn out. But if it is a crime that is a question of a crime against themselves, if you will, I think we've got to revisit that whole system where we make criminals out of people who aren't hurting anybody.
You think of, go ahead.
A good example of that system gone awry is, let's say, a college student cruising down the street at 2 o'clock in the morning, hangs his butt out the window of his car, and a cop happens to see him. And he goes on exactly the same sex offender registry as somebody who's raped a 6-year-old.
Yeah, that's absolutely ridiculous.
We don't even have any objective standard. It's just crime. You're a criminal, and therefore you're shunned by society. We've got to find a better way of handling.
I think at this point, what I want to say is I've had it was an absolutely delightful conversation, and we've learned quite a bit. If someone's listening to this and they're excited about the things that you're hearing, then obviously they want to know more, because we're only really scratching the surface with the things that we've discussed here. Where can someone go to learn more about your campaign and maybe help contribute or volunteer?
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love for them to come to Armstrong2020.com, and on that they'll find links to all of our social media, and right at the top of the first page there's a donor link, and please click on that and help us out, because libertarians do not have big budgets. So we'd love to have some volunteers.
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Decentralized Now with our special guest Ken Armstrong. If you're interested in getting involved in Ken's campaign, be sure to visit kenarmstrong2020.com and make a donation. If you're interested in keeping up with Decentralized Now, be sure to check the Facebook every weekend for new episodes. Be sure to check out SoundCloud for the latest episode. Be sure to check out YouTube and Breaker for every episode this season. Thanks for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.